So thank you, everybody. Good morning. I'm Pam Ryan, and on behalf of Edmonton Public Library, I'm really pleased to welcome you to this morning's presentation from Melody Burton. This presentation is part of EPL's Leader in Residence initiative, a 3-day series of events to provide EPL staff with the opportunity to connect with a Canadian library leader through lectures, meetings, and conversation circles. In keeping with EPL's mission We Share, library staff from other Edmonton and area libraries have also been invited to attend today's presentation, and I can see a few of you in the crowd. Welcome. EPL's Leaders in Residence are selected based on their recognized careers of excellence, their service to the profession, and their ability to inspire positive change and action. Our third Leader in Residence, Melody Burton, has been Chief Librarian at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, since 2005, and is currently also serving as Deputy University Librarian at UBC. Through her wide and varied career, Ms. Burton has made an impact at many academic libraries, having served at Queen's University, University of Windsor, York University, and at the University of Alberta and Concordia College here in Edmonton. At UBC, she is known as an inspiring leader with an imaginative approach to problem solving. She's recognized for her tireless service to the profession and her unwavering commitment to mentorship. Over the last 20 years, her involvement has ranged from the Greater Edmonton Library Association through the Ontario Council of University Libraries to the Canadian Library Association and the International Federation of Library Associations, where she now holds a position on the Academic and Research Libraries Committee. In recognition of her skill and dedication to mentoring, she was recently invited to serve as a mentor at the Northern Exposure to Leadership Institute. And in 2011, I was really proud to be able to present Melody with the Miles Blackwell Outstanding Academic Librarian Award by the Canadian Library Association. To call Melody a formidable debater would be a grave understatement. I've had the absolute pleasure of serving as her debating partner twice, at CLA in 2008 and later at Oxford University in 2009, and I have been smart enough to never accept an invitation to be her debating opponent. At CLA, as CLA's best known and well-loved great debater, she has exemplified her commitment to open dialogue, critical thinking, and engagement with important issues, all served with sharp wit. Please join me in welcoming Melody to EPL.
Good morning. Thanks, Pam, and thanks, EPL, for this wonderful opportunity to talk to you today. I had to pick a very provocative title for my presentation, but it comes with this. Let's talk about bosses. Who was your first boss? You ever think about this? You think about your first boss fondly? It was probably Mom. You might not have thought about it at the time, but you also had a second boss. Probably Dad. It could have been the other way around. But I just wanted to bring this up partly because we've always lived with bosses. They're all around us. And what I'm going to do today is talk about the bosses all around us and the bosses within us. Between Mom and Dad, you probably did notice there were different management styles at work. You figured it out really quickly. And you were probably very successful at knowing when to ask Mom what, and when to ask Dad what, and when to sort of blackmail them. You also had a board, an informal board that you may not have thought about as such. But they sort of look like this. Depends on your family dynamic, who is actually in your family household, what kind of a nuclear family you had, a blended family. It could have been any number of players in today's world. But it probably was anyone that lived with you and sat at the dining room table. The site of many a conversation. You had lobbyists. Know any of them? Mom, I look great in these shoes. Your best friend says, I should go have writing lessons, or I should take piano. Grandma says, blah, 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 blah. You can use these to great effect. And through your life, there have been many pseudo-bosses, most of which, because of their temporary nature, you didn't like too much, or maybe you loved, especially in the case of teachers, but that because of their temporality, you didn't have a lot of opportunity to leverage them. Okay, back to this. Bad bosses, they abound, unfortunately. And we talk mostly about bad bosses. Bosses are the butt of so many jokes in our culture, the butt of those comic strips, the butt of those TV shows. And what is wrong with them? It just can't get away with it. Okay, here's your chance. What's a bad boss? Anybody? Micromanager. Anybody else? Dictator, that'd be bad. That'd be very bad. Inconsistent. Not there. Gone. I picked a few. I mean, on one end of the spectrum, bad bosses would even be criminal, right? They're harassers, maybe they steal money, maybe they've done criminal acts in the workplace. Evil is possibly criminal, maybe not, depending on how clever they are. But that's on one end of the spectrum. Then there's the whole other end of the spectrum, but there's a whole lot in between. Today I'm going to be exploring a lot of the in-between parts of bosses. Bad bosses, another feature, overpaid, overrated, underperformers, the things we don't like about them. Good bosses. Okay, other end of the spectrum? Anyone? Mentors. Empowering. We like that. Collaborative. Sometimes, yeah. Anybody else? Supportive. I thought you said boring. I was going to say that. That could be. The good bosses could be boring. Inspiring. That's what this is all about today, yeah. Anybody else? Good bosses? Trustworthy. Responsive. Think about mom as a good boss. Have your back. Has your back. Some of the things, I put this out on Facebook to get an idea from some of my friends what they thought good bosses were. Really, they're good communicators, a lot think. Great listeners. It's really important that they not just talk well, but that they can listen really well and figure out what the problem is, what is the situation really all about, and that they can be direct and honest in their communication with you. How about this one? There's something about this that actually really resonated with me because one of the things that I don't like about bosses is when they're very weak. So there's something about that Darth Vader. You want that person who's got your back to have strength, to have the character and the ability to carry something off, to have that authority, to use it, to know when to use it well. So you want strength in that boss. But you want, and this is the Yoda piece, which is a bit maybe like mom, the teacher. You want to learn, you want to listen, you want to glean, you want to pull from that wisdom and go, there's something there that I could learn and I could apply to my own practice. So maybe that's 75% mom and 25% dad. I don't know. It depends, again, on your family dynamic. Good bosses are around when you need them. And that somebody said micromanager is a bad boss. A bad boss is probably one who's around way too much, right? They just never leave you alone. They don't get the message. just floating all the time. What are you doing? What are you doing? Some of you mentioned inspiration. They add hope, believe in change. This could be Obama's mantra, right? This is probably why he was elected. He ran on a platform of hope. He ran on a platform of change. And people really wanted to believe in hope and change. They found that particular message and his own personal story inspiring. And I would say good leaders, great bosses, want to make the world a better place. They want to make your workplace a better place. They want to make employees better and happier in themselves, who they are and what they bring to the workplace. They want to make it a better place. For those of us in public service or who work in the public sector, often it comes down to how can we make our services better for the people who consume them, who use them, who visit us every day, who want something from us. How can we make it better for them? And good bosses are usually in short supply, a rare species and underappreciated. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more later. But what kind of a boss are you? Right? We always think we're talking about some other person up here or on an organizational chart that we can point to. But what kind of a boss are you? And do you know what kind of a boss you are? Does anybody ever tell you? Do you ever think about it? Do you ever look yourself in the mirror and go, what do I really think about this? What do I know about this? So, try this at home. You can do this. Test, be your own judge. Look in the mirror. And it can be a really simple rating structure. You don't have to develop a whole assessment tool. Yes, no. And it's okay to do this, right? I mean, you're looking yourself in the mirror. It's okay to do this. But don't be afraid to test. The next piece is to really sit down and spend some time on your practice. Reflect on it. What am I doing? Am I a good boss? Am I a bad boss? Okay. I'm trying hard. But despite the fact that so many of our TV shows, comic strips, make fun of the boss, don't be deterred by that. And don't let it, for many people, I think they're afraid to get into management or to do something where they might have that sort of responsibility because being the boss is perceived as such a negative thing. And who wants to be that person who's open to so much criticism in their day-to-day life? But you do have the opportunity, all of us, to make a difference in someone's life. So I should have a slide up here that says, at this point, the inspirational talk begins. Bosses are everywhere. I think of Tony Soprano as the ultimate boss. Crime boss. But we got all wound up in his story, right? Kelsey Grammer, now in the new show called Boss. Has anybody seen that? It's very good. It's about City Hall, a mayor, Chicago. Is he corrupt or not? He's dealing with illness. Donald Trump, another stereotype of boss. And you don't get to fire family members at that board. And well, if you do, it has some very dire consequences. Bad bosses, who are the worst for me? The worst bosses for me are the weak and indifferent ones that are checked out or unengaged in your organization. The best ones are much harder to define. And in the words of that Canadian prairie cultural theorist, Joni Mitchell, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? And I'd say that was my experience that when I have had a good boss, I didn't know it until the boss was gone. And that's just generally a comment. Thank you. I didn't need that one. Generally, we learn not from success, but from failure. We tend to take our lessons from failures, what not to do, not what to do, but what not to do. For me, the best bosses have been encouraging, half coach, and half cheerleader. Okay, inspirational talk starts now. What is this talk all about? I'd like to share my professional practice and experiences with you. The deceit in all of this is, of course, is that all of us are both good and bad bosses. Somewhere or somehow in our lives, it's a continuum. It's not one or the other. It's a whole range of behaviors between those two end points. Some days are definitely better than others, for me, as I'm sure they are for you. Other days may not have been my best days at work. You know what I'm saying? I could have done a better job. You know that feeling. I could have done better. And you really know when you have done better, when you have had a good day, because it feels so very good. The trick is to recognize your own behaviors. And now, as I'm writing this, I'm thinking, this sounds like good dog, bad dog, and all of that behavior modification that you probably have, several bays of books here around dog training at EPL. But the thing about behaviors, the good part about behaviors, is that they can be controlled. They can be adapted, they can be changed, modified, improved, and enhanced. And all of you who have done dog training know this is true. But it works on us, but only if we understand and know the behaviors that we're talking about. Here's the real advertisement. If you are reflective of your own practice, if you can criticize it, if you can examine it, you can determine how you would like to grow and improve. And this is really about you, not me, but finding your inner boss, for lack of another phrase. And really this is about leadership. And I love this concept of leading from any position. And congratulate yourselves on inventing this. I think it's fantastic. All of us do it. We lead from any position. We model behaviors every day. We're probably just not aware of it. And some behaviors are better than others, right? But you need to think about it. You don't need to dwell on it, but you do need to think about it. And sometimes it's a good idea to just step back, take a look in the mirror, try this at home, check in, how am I doing? I'm saying that this talk isn't about Dilbert or The Office, or the many other workplaces that are portrayed on television. Add up all those set in hospitals and police stations and law firms, and that's probably half of the lineup on all of the networks combined. The fascination really isn't with the workplace or the setting or the shows, as compelling as that might be, but the drama. The drama of the power? No, not really. That's really the least of it. The drama that draws us to those television shows is the relationships that flourish or wither with the characters on the show. How do they interact? What's happening in their lives? The backstories that make them interesting to us. Character development. We watch these shows because we want the characters to succeed. Not just to get the bad guy or cure the patient. That's important. Imagine those shows if the patient always died or the bad guy always got away. That would be pretty weird. But we want the characters to succeed outside of work as well, and sometimes in spite of work. To overcome their addictions, often with alcohol. My personal favorite, I don't know if any of you were fans of the British series, Jane Tennant, don't take that drink, don't drink the alcohol. Now it's Nurse Jackie, don't take that pill. We want these characters to get out of bad relationships, to patch up family quarrels, to find true love, to be understood, because they're always so misunderstood. Now we understand how TV folks write because we identify with these characters, but I digress. It's me, the cultural theorist, again. You see, the characters must be tested every single week, just like you are every single day. Sometimes the test is at work, sometimes it's at home, and sometimes if you're going through a midlife crisis, it's both. It isn't that the test is scary, it's how will you respond to it. What will you bring to this particular task? Only you know. I believe it was Gandhi who said, it's not whether or not you get knocked down, you will, it's whether you get up. And only you know that answer. Well, it actually wasn't Gandhi. I was doing my homework for this. It was Vince Lombardi, a football coach. And now this is a huge saying in rehab. So back to celebrities and television. But I say these things not because I want to sound like a cultural theorist, though I really want to be a cultural theorist. I say these things not because I want to sound like a Hallmark greeting card, because I really don't, but because I want you to know and understand that each of you makes a choice every day to come to work. And what happens in that time at work is very important. Life is short and time is very precious. The time spent at work represents a significant portion of your life. Work is, well, work. It isn't all fun and games. It's work. It's why employers have to pay people to come. It's work. I'm just stating the obvious here, but it's important to accurately understand this relationship as well. Some days at work are hard. You are tested. What will get you up and motivated to come to work? Every day. Every single day. To lead from that position. To deliver that service. To help that patron. You see, some days at work are especially hard these days. Library leaders are hard at work trying to secure budgets as governments make cuts to spending. Some library leaders are trying to lobby for new spaces, for new libraries, for services, for much needed renovations and deferred maintenance. Some library leaders are lobbying for more staff or more services, or to provide services to areas or communities that are without service. Maybe your library is restructuring, like many organizations in the public sector is going through enormous restructuring, either for efficiencies, quote unquote, efficiencies, or they're going through restructuring to rationalize services, to catch up, to have your organizational chart catch up to how your organization has evolved over some period of time. Maybe your work life is changing, it's shifting. Maybe your hours are changing. Maybe there's a general sense of uncertainty in your workplace. You know that something's going to happen. You don't know what, you don't know when, but there's going to be news, and it's probably not going to be wonderful. Maybe there's an election in your province. And as the cab driver said to me, Danielle Steele of the Red Rose Party is going to win by a landslide. I couldn't have picked a better time to come to Edmonton. It's like real life drama going on. And if that's the case, there'll be real uncertainty in your province, right? Because after 41 years of the Conservative Party, there'd be not only a different party, but a very different approach, I think, to government in this province. Certainly that will be the headline in every paper in Canada tomorrow, should Danielle Steele win. Just, I can't imagine how popular those books are going to be then. She doesn't need a job. She's got one. And maybe your job is secure, but it's changing. This is the case certainly in my own organization. And maybe subtle changes in your job will affect you personally. Maybe there's a shift to the hours of opening at your branch or your location. Maybe there are workflow changes anticipated that will change your daily routine. Maybe you will spend more time with the public or less time doing something that you enjoyed. Did we lose the mic? I'll just wait to get.
Perhaps I'll put this other microphone in front of you,
Okay.
and we'll kind of live through it.
Okay. Don't it always seem to go, but you don't know what you've got till it's gone. I love cultural theorists. We forget all the ones that are all around us all the time. I don't know, I think it cut out somewhere around maybe your job is secure, but it's changing. And even subtle changes may affect you personally. There may be a shift change at your branch. The hours of opening will affect your particular schedule. Maybe workflows are changing and will affect your daily routine. Maybe you'll spend more time with the public or less time doing something that you personally enjoyed at work. Trust me, this is happening in workplaces across Canada and in libraries particularly. And if this is happening to you, you are not alone. Perhaps there's some comfort in that for you. But here's what good bosses are good at. Maybe there's some positive change going on too. Maybe your physical space is being renovated. Every time I come here, by the way, somebody is using a jackhammer in the lobby. I don't know if you guys know that in management, but I hope that's always planned, or it's part of the daily routine. But library can't open until there's a certain amount of jackhammering going on in the front lobby. Maybe you're moving into a position with more responsibility. That's happening a lot, actually, by the way. Maybe it's different work that you're going to be doing, and you will learn something new. Maybe you'll figure out how to use digital books and teach others how to use them as well. Maybe this is a positive challenge for you. You can impress your mother-in-law and your kids with this new knowledge around ebooks. Bonus. Your friends and relatives will be impressed. Maybe you have a new boss after having the same boss for a long period of time, and you have the opportunity to establish a terrific relationship, to start over, to start fresh. Maybe you are moving to a new branch, and the thought of working with a super successful team, as they are rumored to be, excites you. But at the end of the day, and your body will tell you, positive change can give you the jitters too. In my job, I've had more change in the last 8 months than I believed possible. Yet the good part is that I found something in myself that I didn't know was there. I had to dig a little deeper, and I rose to the challenge. And I won't lie and say that it's all been easy or wonderful. It hasn't, but it was definitely worth doing, if only to learn that I had the ability to find something more. And it was well worth learning that about myself. And I think that in our workplaces, especially when we have the opportunity to work so late in life, thank you, no mandatory retirement, that if we work longer and longer, if we stay in the same workplace for 20, 30, and now in my workplace there are people who've worked there for over 40 years now. If you're going to work somewhere for 40 years, that you want to make sure that you build in some stretch goals along the way so that you do have the opportunity to grow and learn more about yourself. So, back to this life is short mantra, and it's a personal mantra for me. Life is too short. Sometimes the people in our lives leave us too soon. And on this other hand, life is too long, right? You spend a lot of time at work. And it's too long not to be doing the things that you want to do. And life is too short not to want to get up and come to work ready to take on that day. So for me, this talk is really a call to action for all of you to do something, to reach to be a good boss, a better boss, a great boss, to make a difference in someone's life, in a patron's life, in the event, in the exchange, in the interaction that you have, which seems so small, but can be so meaningful for that individual. And I know we're going to have time. I'm going to share, and I can't resist telling a library story about EPL. But when you do take up that call to shift, and it's back to this, is the glass half empty, the glass half full, all those things that Grandma said to you, don't meet trouble halfway, run to goodness, run away from badness, whatever it is. But if you can manage to shift your head to think that you can and do make a difference every day, it makes it easier to come to work and make a difference every day. That's not to say there aren't, times when work is hard and there are, difficult conversations with patrons or with colleagues or with your boss. You have to have all of those. But at the end of it all, you have to do it in some way that is true to you, that you've been able to communicate well, your circumstance, your situation, put it out there, and make a difference. If you will indulge me, I have to tell you an EPL story that made a difference in my life. Is there anyone in the room that was an employee here in 1984 or later, or just in the 80s, late 80s? A few of you. Okay. Well, you may remember this. I may have met some of you. When I lived here, I was a graduate student at the University of Alberta. I was thrilled with this library. And I used to come and borrow records from the second floor. And I did this because I grew up in rural Canada. There's a lot of rural Canada still in this province. I came from a rural area, and I loved music. I had exhausted all of the music that belonged to my parents and my brother and sister. But I wanted to listen to other kinds of music than what they had. I didn't know anything about classical music. I didn't know anything about jazz. I wanted to listen to that music, and I didn't know what to buy. I could have bought something. I didn't even know what to buy that was intimidating at the store. But I wanted to learn about this music in rural Canada where I lived. I couldn't even get CBC radio on the radio station. So when I was 24 years old, I came to this library and I found the record collection on the second floor. And it was filled with classical music and jazz albums. And you used to sign them out, and they would put them in a white bag and then seal them. Does anybody remember this? Seal them like Sam the Record Man. And then you could, I think there was a limit, 20 or 25, on how many you could have. People are nodding. This is great. So I haven't made this up. This was a real scenario. And one year at Christmas time, I came to get some albums. I couldn't afford to fly home to Nova Scotia for Christmas, so I thought, I'm going to stock up on music. So I came in to the library, and they said, take as many as you want. So I took yeah, go for it. Take. So I took, I don't know, probably 50 albums. And I went home, and I just listened to as many different jazz albums as I could. And this was the beginning of my jazz education. So I could listen and go, no, that's really weird, I don't like that, or what is that all about? And I could experiment and explore in a way that I could never have afforded myself. So the takeaway for me is that Edmonton Public Library changed my life. Today I own in excess of 2,000 jazz albums. I launched my hobby here. I am amazed that what I discovered here, because I continue to rediscover some of that music today. But the thing that I think we don't understand in public libraries is that you give children and adults the opportunity to explore something they don't know in a very safe environment. Things that they maybe ultimately don't like, but they don't know they don't like them because they haven't had a chance to listen, hear them, or read them. So when I tell this story to myself, or I think about it, reflect on it, I think, does this mean we shouldn't weed our collections? Because the stuff we don't like is still worthwhile. But in some ways, it really is. And I thank whoever the kind people were on that second floor who allowed me to take all those extra albums so that over the Christmas break, I could explore my newfound music taste so deeply. And it's never stopped. So never underestimate the impact that your collection and your services are having on someone. You never know. I was never an employee here, but I've always had fond memories of this library, and especially this stage too, because I was here, I'd have to think, 1989, there was a concert here. There were, the Jazz Festival used to have concerts here. I don't know if you still do. One of the best concerts I ever saw was Carla Bley and Steve Swallow on this stage, and I made myself go to the Green Room and see where, in fact, they probably were too. So let's see what I've got here. Bottom line, channel that inner boss, find out who you are, make a difference in someone's life, and don't be afraid to do the ultimate assessment tool to yourself. Look in the mirror, thumbs up, thumbs down. Thank you very much, and I understand there's lots of time for questions. Anybody want to talk about Michael Scott?
Am I on, Alistair? I'm on? Okay. Thank you very much, Melody. Before we take questions, I just want to recognize whoever it was in 1984 who was even then finding a way to say yes to help you with your Christmas dilemma. We have a couple of microphones here. We can run up, and if you have any questions for Melody, just stick up your hand and I'll come up to you. Oh, come on, someone wants to go first. Richard?
I'll start asking.
I don't even really have a question. But I was just going to, oh, jeez. Michael Scott is a terrible boss, but even he has moments of incredible insight that occasionally are quite moving. And how would you counsel him? Because looking in the mirror, he thinks he's the greatest boss on the face of the world, but what would you say to him?
Well, I'm not a Michael Scott expert, but he's one of those guys who can't get over himself, right? He's just so, he's maybe looking in the mirror too much. I don't know what I'd say to Michael, and undoubtedly there are a lot of bosses like him, and you always wonder, is it Jane from corporate that comes and talks to him a lot of the time? Yeah, I don't know what I'd say to Michael. Let me think about that. What would you say to Michael? What do you want said to Michael? What do we think corporate should say to Michael? Maybe that's another way of phrasing it. I recently watched the episode on diversity training. Did anybody see that? And it's just so doesn't get anything, right? And it's like he has no sense of humor, but he thinks he's hilarious. He just doesn't get what's happening in the workplace at all. He doesn't understand, so it's almost like he needs a brain transplant. He probably needs to not be the boss, and, well, I guess that's sort of stating the obvious, but he needs to be like undercover boss or something. He needs to see it from the other side. He's missing that empathy piece that we all want in bosses. He just doesn't have it. And that was part of the whole diversity thing, right? That you have to have empathy and respect and honesty, and I forget what the last one was. Openness. Yeah, he didn't know what that was.
Any other questions or comments? Good boss, bad boss comments?
Thank you, Melody. I have a question about collecting feedback from staff, because sometimes as a person, as a boss, I can have really untrue and distorted vision of myself as a boss, and I can praise myself and say, you are great, you are great, you are great. Even in reality, it can be not true. And I just wanted to ask for your advice on the best method or any techniques to collect feedback from the staff, because from my experience, it's kind of very difficult. Whenever I talk to staff, frankly, during evaluation or whatever can you recommend me to be a better boss, people kind of scared to tell the truth because I'm doing the evaluation. So I just wanted to ask for your advice, your recommendations.
That is such a good question, because people won't tell you, or they won't. They won't. You can do this in meetings. It happens to me all the time. Now I sound like Michael Scott. I asked for, feedback. Nothing happened. Until, of course, I left the room, and then, going on. It's really hard to get honest feedback from our staff about what's happening. There are different ways of doing it, I think. If you're talking about one-on-one feedback, and it's probably best to try to do it event by event rather than some large lump. How did I do this year? Is a lot harder to answer than how did that meeting go, or did something come across that needed to come across, or do you think this initiative is going to succeed, or why not? That sort of thing, just to try to maybe assess the effectiveness of how something is working or coming across. I think the most effective learning, and I mentioned it comes when things go wrong. And that's the excellent opportunity to debrief with your staff, to say, look, what happened in there today, right? Like we didn't understand each other, and it showed, and what can we do about that? So I think being very honest and direct, putting something out there that's concrete, that a staff member can actually say, yeah, I didn't like that either, or no, that wasn't my best moment, wasn't my best day, didn't come together very well, is probably a good starting point. Anybody want to add to that or think about getting feedback? I think it's very hard to speak to bosses. I find it very hard to tell my boss what I think. And we sometimes put things in very coded messages. Well, I don't think it went over so well. Like maybe it was just a really bad idea that I'm trying to say that would never go over well. It had nothing to do with going over. It was just a dumb idea. Or I don't think we have 100% buy-in, which means, like maybe nobody's buying in. So, watch for those kinds of comments if you can figure out what they are, because some of us are very good at giving them. Maybe we should try again later, or sometimes the handoff is another one. Maybe Bill could get some traction on this, which means you're the wrong person to be doing this. Later is sometimes let's file it and hope it goes away. So there's all that kind of feedback that comes in very coded ways to managers that can be interpreted if you're willing to peel it back and go, okay, what are you really saying? If you're willing to go to the next layer of questioning, maybe your staff will be saying, oh, okay. In my experience, some of my staff are very happy to let me know when things don't work and they don't like situations. Sometimes they're very difficult situations to deal with, and then the frustration around being a bad boss is that you don't have a magic wand to go, oh, I can change this person by waving a wand, and therefore everything will be nice and lovely in your department now. Because so many of our gripes are about people and the relationships. The Michael Scotts who are toxic in workplaces that bring unwelcome qualities into the workplace. And you've all probably worked with someone that when they left, you couldn't believe what a difference it made to the dynamic of a work group because there was a toxic individual. But what can bosses do about toxic individuals? Maybe this is, back to Michael Scott. What do you do with somebody who's just so horrible that it's pointless? What do you do? You can't wave a wand and turn them into somebody else. They have to want to be somebody else, and they probably don't. But I would suggest to you, just keep asking lots of questions. Try to find some things that are concrete events. Stick to issues, right? Stick to issues. Don't get too personal, because it's much more difficult to give personal feedback. But if you stick to issues, you can get it.
Other comments, questions? Oh, Ms. Wilson in the back row.
Hi, Melody.
Hi, Kit.
I have a question for you from sort of the opposite perspective. As you've been a mentor and a boss to many individuals over the years, what are the qualities or characteristics that you sort of look for or experience in new professionals that give you insight into this person is probably going to be a good boss or a good leader in the profession, and how to encourage that without sort of making that person into a favorite?
Well, I guess maybe it's the same quality that makes us good employees, that makes us good bosses, or whatever. Whenever I mentor anyone, the quality I'm looking for is someone who wants to learn. Somebody who wants to learn. If the individual doesn't want to learn, then there's no opportunity for growth. If there's no opportunity for growth, there's not going to be any evolution in their time with you. So what you've got is kind of what you're going to have. So it's that growth that you're looking for, because it's when you stop learning that it gets to be much more difficult in the workplace. And it's, as a therapist once said to me, why do relationships succeed? She said, I was very frustrated one day. Imagine having a frustrated therapist who said, people always want to know about relationships and, why they are the way they are. And it's not about love, she said, it's about growing. People need to continue to grow together. It's usually when one of the individuals stops growing and the other continues that they start to grow apart. And it doesn't stick. So it's growth. We all need to grow and continue to learn, because it's that learning that helps give us the opportunity to reflect from our own experiences and learn from our own experiences and to improve. So that's the whole piece around reflection, that without it, you don't get anywhere. So we all because we're all good bosses, bad bosses, and on different days, any number of things. But you have to kind of know who you are and what you bring to it. So that's the whole piece for me, is mentoring is about learning. There was a second part to that, Kit, that I think I've missed.
Yeah, and then when you do, feel that this is a person with a lot of potential and whatnot
Right.
in your workplace, how do you avoid, sort of then having that person be a favorite, to put it bluntly, and to see them as like giving them more advantages than you would other colleagues that you're working with?
Pass. No. I don't know how you'd handle that situation, because it certainly presents itself, right? When you have someone who is presenting somewhat as a bit of a star, and they're certainly capable of growth, they're eager for it, they're ambitious, they want it, it seems like a perfect match. Why wouldn't you task that person with X number of assignments to have them grow? It seems like a very logical move. It's just that it probably happens with more frequency, and others want their turn. And I guess what comes up then is the opportunity, right? How do you spread around the opportunities to your emerging group to see, okay, well, I'm going to stick with Bill or Jim, or Sally seems to be able to to do this, but I don't know about Karen. How can Karen do? I don't know. Maybe I should give her a chance to see how she'll perform in a similar circumstance. Often there are many more opportunities than we realize, though, and I think that's something I haven't made enough use of in my own practices. There are more opportunities to hand out to people, to give them chances to grow, to delegate. It's not that we hold on to delegation, we just forget to hand it off. And so if we can do more of that, I think we'll have a better chance of spreading it around and less potential for being accused of playing favorites. But when you have somebody who's a real star, why not dole out some important work for that individual to see if they can continue to grow?
Other comments?
Melody, last week our EPL managers had a meeting, and one of the topics of discussion there was resilience as a manager. And we talked a lot about the emotional labor of being a boss and being a good boss. And I would just appreciate your comments on resilience and how we get there in work that is often very, very difficult.
Resilience is only required in empathetic bosses. The Michael Scotts don't have to worry about that. They have it all the time. In fact, I once had a bad boss who will remain nameless, but who never suffered stress. And I only realized later it's because you don't care. And there's something very true about if you don't absorb a certain amount of the emotional issues, you don't struggle with them. They just fall on the floor. So I think that's one key negative way that people cope with it. But the emotional resilience is really an important area, and I've seen this happen in my own workplace, and it's happening in a number of workplaces right now. The issues that we're dealing with sometimes are so substantial, and the change is so great that it's hard not to be affected enormously by it. The key, I think, to survival in these circumstances and to being resilient is to ensure that you can compartmentalize it enough while you're living it. It's going on, especially if it's a very long-term issue, it can be very draining. But if it's going on for a period of time, find some way of sectioning off a piece of your day or home life, even if it has to bleed into that. Find that time when you can sit and talk about it with your partner, friend. This is happening, this is real to me, and I'm finding it very difficult to deal with. So make sure that you're doing that piece of working it out, but then know when to stop working it out and to do something else and to put it away. It's that being able to continue to live your life, to not let it dominate your emotional spectrum. So give it the space that it needs, and then let other things happen, put it away. And then at some point, you have to let it go. I think when some change, especially changes that we don't support in our own organizations, you have to make a decision personally that either I have to get good with this, turn the page, then let it go, or I have to leave the organization if I can't accept it, because every day it just smacks me in the head. So that resilience has to be honest enough. I can get good with this and then get good with this and turn the page. Because if it's a struggle for a long period of time with no end in sight, then it's probably an indication of something more deep-seated. That's my advice. Did your group come up with any good suggestions?
Did we? I don't know, did we? I don't think so. I think we're having another meeting this fall on emotional labor, and I think we'll be looking at it further. What we actually did was we had a discussion based on Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, yeah, and realized that things could be a whole lot worse, which perhaps is a resilience-building avenue in itself.
Things could be a whole lot worse is kind of part and parcel with that figuring out how bad things really are, because if your life is pretty good, one bad thing can look really bad, but when you put it in perspective, it isn't so bad. So that's a good piece. It's also like Obama's campaign, right? The recession could have been worse. It's very hard to sell that negative message because people still see the negative in it.
Any other comments? Questions? I don't want to leave anyone out. All right. Well, Melody, let me just come up to the front.
Oh, that's okay.
On behalf of EPL, stay with me. On behalf of EPL, thank you so much. I think this has been a great introduction to the next 3 days. And I know that people are probably milling about, and those signed up for conversation circles are already starting to formulate things they want to talk about. And I'm sure you're inspired and wanting to spend some more time with Melody later this week. So on behalf of EPL, thank you very much.
Thank you.